It's really a great privilege for us to be able to welcome back Rabbi Yaakov Gibber, who last year was here for one of our Lunch and Learn sessions, and it was just truly a wonderful experience. And I think that the fact that you have some of the congregants who've actually come here to hear you this afternoon is really a testament to how extraordinary you are. And Rabbi Gibber is the rabbi of the Boyton Jewish Center. Also was affiliated at one time with Yeshiva Netiv Aryeh in Yerushalayim. I personally know a lot of the Talmidim who were there through the years with my affiliation. And I know that it's always important to try to think of a topic that kind of piques your interest. And so when Hannah was sending me the material about today's program, and I saw the topic that Rabbi Yaakov Gibber was going to be dealing with, it really did pique my interest. The topic is the Odyssey of the Absence Presence. So without further ado, I'd like to call upon Rabbi Gibber.
Thank you so very much. I'm deeply grateful to the officers of the Orthodox Union, the leaders of the Orthodox Union, in particular, and the partners for this coordination, Congregation Anshe Chesed for hosting, co-hosting the leadership of this synagogue, for the skill coordination of this entire program, have invited me to join as a part of it is this 3-day wonderful symposium of the Spirit program. When you think of Spirit, you think of Spirit Airlines. Here we're flying together.
Anything else?
I don't know if the lunch was on time, it wasn't on time, it has a little bit to do with the Spirit Airline analogy. Okay, but I'm very grateful to be here in your company this afternoon, and of course would like to acknowledge the presence of my dear congregants, Linda Golden, Richie Edelson. I'm very thankful to share this time together with them as well. I think that it is fairly safe to say that perception of the reality isn't always necessarily the actual reality. There's the perception, there's the figment of our imagination, it's the supposed conclusions that we draw. Take, for example, the following story. There's a man who goes to the doctor and he says, "Doc, I have a problem." What's the problem? "I don't think my wife's hearing is as good as it used to be. Doc, give me some advice. Tell me, what should I do?" So the doctor says, "I want you to try the following when you get home, and with this test you'll know for sure if in fact her hearing is impaired. When your wife is in the kitchen and she finds herself perhaps doing some dishes, I want you to stand about 15 feet or so behind her. And I want you to ask her one question. And I want you to keep asking the same question while you're moving closer and closer until she hears you." So on this particular occasion, the man goes home and he sees his wife preparing for dinner. And he stands about 15 feet behind her. And he says, "Honey, what's for dinner?" No response. Inches a little bit closer. And he asks her again, "Dear, what's for dinner?" And again, no response. And this time a little bit closer. And finally, after no response, he inches himself really just behind her. And he says, "Dear, what's for dinner?" And so she says, "For the 4th time, I said chicken is for dinner." The perception of who was hard of hearing in the story, and the conclusions that are drawn as a result of what our perceived reality, that which is the matter at hand, is very significant. And so what I'd like to discuss this afternoon is a clinical concept, something that is very much at the forefront of, I would say, our greatest challenge. They're really two independent concepts when uniquely bonded together form what I consider a great and a significant challenging condition. It's the condition of the absence presence, What is the condition of the absence presence? So Oxford English Dictionary defines both of these terms as we would expect, independently as they are. The fact or condition of being present is presence. And if you will, the state of being absent or away is absence. Independent. There really isn't if you will, a coalescing of these two words together. That is the function of this clinical process, or challenge as I'd like to refer, of the absence presence. They're independent individual concepts, and hereby the fusion of these two, the idea of the absence presence. What is the absence presence? The absence presence theory is that really perhaps functionally / physically I find myself present. I'm actually there, but I have the opportunity perhaps to be absent. Maybe I'm not there. I'm there or I'm not there. Which one is it? Now, you see, this is a condition that I think that if not every single one of us, so I speak for myself, many of us, I should say, succumb to the challenge of the absence presence. We're here, but we're not really here. Now, I have to admit, and I have to be totally fair when I say that there are pros and cons to the absence presence function. Let's start with the pros. What are the pros? The pros are, I don't know if anybody here has ever been stuck in traffic before. Anyone stuck in traffic? You're from New York? You're from New York, right? New York? You don't even hear from New York. It's about 80 degrees colder from where we are now, right? So if you're stuck in traffic, and you find yourself in the world of technology in the year 2014, and you have a smartphone, for example, and you're able to sit in traffic, and instead of the painstaking awfulness of what it means to sit in that traffic, you're able to actually take yourself out of that moment and zoom yourself into cyberspace, and you don't even have to really be in traffic anymore. It's not as painful. I can return my emails, I can look on the web, I can find, it's not safe, granted, but I don't even have to actually be there. It's not as painful. It's a 2-hour delay on the George Washington Bridge. Great, I have 75 emails. I'm going to surf the web. I'll see what's latest on CNN.com. It'll be fantastic. Has anyone ever been to a doctor's office before? Now, I don't know about you, but usually when you go to the doctor's office, they don't see you. You make an appointment for 1 o'clock. So how many times is it, I'm sorry for the doctor's office, is it that a doctor sees you at 1 o'clock? My appointment's at 1, and he sees you at 1 o'clock. I would say, never, right? So there's this new invention called the waiting room. And the waiting room is this arduous place, this conglomerate of very frustrated people, where your appointment is supposed to be at a certain time, and I'm just sitting there waiting for them to call me. And it's painful. Oh, but now I have a smartphone, and now I have a way for myself to zoom myself out of the pain of waiting there, and I put myself into another place. I'm present, but I'm absent. I don't have to sit there and be pained by the colossal waste of time that exists as a result of my sitting in that place. Those are the pros of the absence presence. But now let's deal with the cons. Let's deal with the challenge. And of course, I only highlight 3, and of course, there are many more. The first of the cons is in the world of the relationship between parents and children. How many times has it been, perhaps you've been to a park, and you see, for example, a father is pushing the child on the swing set, and what they're doing simultaneously while they're being officially present as the chaperone in the relationship with their child, they're on their phone. They're busy with something else. So, when that father returns back home, and wife will say, did you spend quality time with the child? So what's the answer?
Yes.
You would assume that the answer you would say is yes. But I'm asking you honestly, intellectually and functionally honestly, did that parent spend time with that child? No. The parent was absent, albeit present, in that situation. They weren't really with the child because they were distracted. Let's talk about the world of the relationship between husbands and wives. Sometimes I find myself, recently I was at a local Boca Raton eatery, and I saw a couple that I know very, very well, and I saw something fascinating. That perhaps it was a chance for them to get out and have a babysitter and spend time together. And what were they doing? Maybe they were texting each other, I don't know. Honey, what'd you order? I don't know. I got the chicken, what'd you got? I got the beef. You know? And so they're really there, but they're not really there. And how painful, and how difficult, and how sad. And let's talk about spirituality. Let's talk about ruchnius. You come on a Shabbos morning, you come to the synagogue, you come to the house of worship, and you're there. But are you really there? Are you engaged for which the purpose called your attention to be there on a Shabbos morning? Or is it a camaraderie with friends? Is it a socializing? Is it gathering? Not so much about the spiritual call, the odyssey for which I am so fortunate to be part of. I'm taking advantage of that spiritual, let's call it the opportunity. I'm there, but I'm not really there. I'm not really recharged in any imaginable way, not spiritually, not physically, not emotionally. Maybe I filled my tummy at the local kiddush, maybe I've gossiped with some of my chaverim or some of my friends, but I haven't really accomplished what it is that I came to accomplish, necessarily. Not everyone, but I haven't necessarily accomplished what I came to accomplish. And I have to tell you that it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating, the phenomenon or levels for which distraction and the things that grab our attention. If we take a step back and just function and consider what those things are, where we spend our time, what are the things that we are focused on? Why are we focused on certain things to the exclusion of others? Even if it will end up being that I find myself in the presence of something that demands my attention in a different way. I've mentioned in my congregation before, on the occasion I was able to take my children to a baseball game. So I have different ages of my children. So one of my younger sons, going to a baseball game for him is the best. He doesn't pay attention to the ball game. He's interested in the Cracker Jacks. He's interested in the licorice. He's interested in the soda. He's interested in the game. And this is a great machlekes between one son and another son. The other son is quieting him down while he's chewing too loud. He wants to see what's happening on the field. How do we make those distinctions? How do we make those choices? What pulls our attention? How are we to focus? It's really remarkable. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the significance of the calendar date today where we find ourselves. Today, actually it's interesting, the Hebrew date and the English date are the same, minus out the name of the month. Today is the 4th day of the month of Adar Rishon, and today is the 4th day of the month of February. Now, does anybody know what is significant about today's English date? Is anybody's birthday? Pardon me? You got to know that. Anybody's birthday? Yeah, birthday. What's significant about today's date? February the 4th, 2014. Anybody know? If you're in my congregation, you can cheat. What?
021404.
Hold on, someone playing the lottery here? Let's go. Write that down. What's going on? 020414. Bingo. Sounds like a bingo lottery. What? I like that mathematician. That fast on my guy. Oh, Baruch Hashem. Today, February the 4th, in the year 2014, marks the 10-year anniversary of Facebook. That's right! February 4th, 2004, my good friend, Mark Zuckerberg, no, I wish it was my good friend, Mark Zuckerberg, right? Yeah? Mark Zuckerberg, Moshe Menachem Zuckerberg, congregation, have a Facebook wing of our main sanctuary. So Mark Zuckerberg, with a bunch of his comrades, his colleagues in his dormitory, they initiated Facebook. It's a household name, February 4th. So why is that significant? It's amazing. In Time magazine this past week, they initiated a new app. Now, there's an app for everything. You sneeze, there's an app, there's a tissue that comes out of the screen. It gives you an app, right? So there's a new app. On the, the celebration of the anniversary of Facebook, what's that app? The app, maybe frightening for many, certainly the younger in the generation who are over-involved in Facebook, the app marks and calibrates how much time one is logged in on Facebook. Now, this is not a statistic that probably many people would be happy to know about. How many painstaking hours, how much time, how much effort, how much lost time is there that exists as a result of how much a person spends, for example, on Facebook? It's incredible. How much we're infatuated with certain things. Do you know how many hits there were at the following website? Maybe you heard of it. www.willitsnow.com. Do you know what that website was about? The incredible infatuation and frenzy of if in fact it would snow in the Meadowlands at MetLife Stadium this past Sunday night at the Super Bowl. Chalila v'chas, then it should snow. How much interest is there? I don't know how many hits they get at H.com or on AnsheChesed.com. I'm not sure at the OU.com. But I can almost guarantee you that WillItSnow.com was a far more popular website, certainly for Super Bowl fans, which there were just probably one or two. Could you imagine? I'm always curious what the statistics would look like if there existed an app that measured the amount of time we spend with our families. An app that measured the amount of time that we spend with something significant, something important, shul, spirituality, things that are meaningful. How would those statistics look? What would that app look like? Probably it wouldn't be so exciting. Maybe it wouldn't be as popular. So the question this afternoon that I'd like to focus our time is, how do we maintain our level of focus? How do we keep our eye on the ball, so to speak, if you will, during a time when there is seemingly so much distraction that seems to be at its ultimate peak, at its highest moment? How are we ourselves to be engaged, focused? How are we to teach our children and our grandchildren to be better and more focused, to utilize tools such as Facebook, to utilize the internet and surfing the web as tools, as resources, but not to be overtaken by that which is in the life work, to distract us to the point for which we are unable to function normally? So how do we do it? So I'd like to, if we can, in the world of recalling some anniversaries, by way of trying to understand some insights, some skills, some inspiration, is by sharing with you another, if you will, another anniversary. There was another anniversary that took place just under a month ago, and the anniversary date, let's see if anybody here knows it, January the 15th, the year 2009. So that means that this past January 15, 2014 was the 5-year anniversary of this cataclysmic event that happened in New York City. Thereby almost just gave it away. Anybody know? Anybody remember? Anna Park, New York City, anybody remember?
Wall Street.
Pardon me?
Wall Street.
So let me tell you what happened. There's a captain, and his name was Captain Chesley Sullenberger. Chesley Sullenberger was the captain. U.S. Airways Flight 1549 that fortunately had a safe landing in the Hudson. Had to evacuate after hitting a flock of Canadian geese. I should blame the Canadians. It's probably American geese, right? Definitely wasn't Israeli geese, that's for sure. Right? And he had to ditch the plane in the Hudson River. And how difficult it was in the hills of 9/11 for New Yorkers. I mean, imagine, you can still, right? We still see the imagery in our own minds and our own heads of the 154 passengers, himself included 154 passengers, standing on the wings of those two aircrafts in frigid 20-degree New York City weather with frigid conditions in the Hudson. You can only imagine. So when he was interviewed, and he gave an interview in 60 Minutes, he's got a tremendous book, which I'm currently reading, his autobiography. So he was asked, what was it that gave him the stamina, gave him the courage, gave him the confidence, the skill to keep himself composed during those terribly tragic 3 minutes and 24 seconds since hitting that flock of geese until he landed in the Hudson? What was it? And I actually think that by considering these 3 things and using this to catapult into 3 specific segments, we'll hopefully be more aware of, more conscious, and more successful to overcome the odyssey of the absence presence. He said basically it boiled down to 3 things. He said, first of all, there's the need to aviate, there was the need to navigate, and there was the need to communicate. One more time. He says he needed to aviate, he needed to navigate, and he needed to communicate. Now, if we think about what does that mean in his case, he said, I needed to keep my hands on the plane. There was so much chaos and so much commotion. I needed to actually drive, I needed to hold the steering wheel. Not that there is a steering wheel on an airplane, but if there would be a the steering wheel measure. You had to hold the steering wheel. But he also had to navigate. He had to know his coordinates. He had to know the longitude and the latitude. He needed to know how far, how much fuel is it, what's happening. And lastly, he needed to communicate with towers, his crew, his passengers. So if you think about the world of spirituality, sometimes part of the greatest challenge is that one of those 3 elements is flawed. Now, in this case, it was an emergency. In our case, I'd like to suggest the aviate, navigate, communicate is something that is the tool in our shed that is so significant to reaching the destinations that we intend, that we hope, that we want. We have to keep our hands on the siddur. We have to keep our hands on the steering wheel. We have to know very clearly where we're going and navigating where it is that our destination, our place, our point of interest is. And we must communicate. We have to communicate first and foremost with ourselves. We must first and foremost communicate with our community and everything that's around us. So let's understand first and foremost, what does that mean? Let's understand three categories. In consideration on the heels of aviate, navigate, communicate, let's put this into three specific categories, and in so doing, we'll perhaps have some technique and some skill in understanding how to navigate through the challenge of the absence presence. The first and, I would say, foremost, most significant thing is to know what it is. Let's talk about Yahadus, Judaism, the beauty and the special grandeur of Yahadus. Let's talk about a house of worship. Let's talk about a sanctuary. Let's talk about a synagogue. So let's understand, if we can, what is the significance? This past week's parsha, Va'osuli mikdash v'shachanti v'socha, means God commands Moshe, Rabbeinu, Moses, build for me, command the Israelites, build for me a tabernacle and I shall dwell therein. We of course know this was this edifice for which in future there would be the building of the Boyton, the sanctuary, the temple in Yerushalayim, right? It would travel with them in the desert, and then ultimately would be rebuilt in its permanence by Rishon, by Sheni. Think about how much of our attention, think about how much tefillah, think about how many Tisha B'Avs we sit through, hoping that by Shlishi, that the third temple will be rebuilt in our day, it should happen. How much, there is no edifice more significant than the edifice of the Mishkan, than the edifice of the Beis HaMikdash, than the edifice of our sanctuary. As Chazal teach us, the Navi tells us it's a Mikdash Ma'at, it's a small little microcosm of a macro idea. The Beis HaMikdash is our sanctuary. But let me ask you just a simple, basic, fundamental question. The question is, I'm curious if anybody's even ever thought about this. Why do you even need a shul? Why do you even need a Beis HaMikdash? It permeates our every thought, our tefillos, our tears. We talk about Gibber on Tisha B'Av, of course. Why do we want the Beis HaMikdash? Why do we need it so badly? Why did God command Moshe Rabbeinu that there should even be a Mishkan? What's the significance of that question? Why do we even ask that question? How is God described? Ribono Shel Olam is described as omnipresent. What is omnipresent? Omnipresent means that I can access Him anytime, any place, anywhere I want. So to suggest that I need a central address to be able to access Him is antithetical to the very existence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvaydo u'ba'atzma. Why do I need it? Why was it necessary for us to have such an address? You ever wonder why that's true? I don't need a shul. I can daven at home. And by the way, you can. I'm not saying you should, because we need a million. There's a different time. We'll invite another time. We'll talk about the importance of a million. But I'll ask you, why do you need it? Why so much emphasis? So let me tell you the answer. The answer is as follows. I shared this past week in our shul. I shared an incredible study, an incredible finding. There's a Canadian psychologist, McKenna? Good, so good credit. So, not the Canadian geese, there's a Canadian psychologist and professor. And his name was Professor Bruce Alexander. You ever heard of him? Bruce Alexander? So Bruce Alexander was famous for something very significant. He became very interested in experiments that took laboratory rats and exposed them to heroin and opiates, various other addictive drugs, narcotics, and saw and studied to what extent these rats would find themselves doped to oblivion. And he saw that this study was, producing profound information. And then he noticed something so obvious. And then he hypothesized with some of his colleagues something so serious and so significant, something so meaningful. You know what he thought? He realized, you know what the problem is? The problem is that these laboratory rats, the reason why perhaps they're so interested in engaging in this doping to oblivion is because they're not happy in their surroundings. Maybe their surroundings aren't great. Maybe they're unable in the surroundings that they find themselves in currently to maintain the stature for which they're not to dope themselves to oblivion. So you know what he did? He created what he calls a rat park, or he calls it a rat spa. So basically what he did, instead of taking a standard cage, he made a spa cage for these rats. And the study suggested that once there was another place, a happy or fulfilling place for these rats to go, when given the choice of drinking just plain water versus laced morphine water, 9 out of 10 times these lab rats chose plain water. And the study suggested because of the fact that there was this sanctuary, because there was this spa, because there was this place for them to go, that they were interested, right? There was a level of happiness, of satisfaction. And see, perhaps this will really answer why, in fact, God, who originally did not intend for there to be a Mishkan. We don't need a Mishkan for us to relate to God. But what happened was that, unfortunately, the Jews, when left to their own device, when they're wandering in the desert, what happened? They worshipped the golden calf, the sin of the golden calf, the Chet HaEgel. They realized that they wanted an edifice. God said, you want an edifice? I'm going to give you an edifice. Left alone, I have to give you some spiritual sanctuary for which you will come to, and it will be the remedy, the antidote, the possibility for which you're going to remedy your waywardness, your inability to relate to me. It is the gift that is given to us as a people to be able to relate to Him. And I would suggest, and imagine, just like, for example, a person finds themselves in an environment, let's just say you find yourself in a spa. It's actually one of the few places people go. There's no phones allowed. You can't bring your phone in there. You can't bring your emails in there. You can't bring your... Right? We have to create a spiritual spa. A place that we go that we don't need any other distractions. I'm actually in that place when I come to pray, I come to worship, I'm engaged in that activity. I don't need any other distractions because I'm engaged. I'm there. I'm spiritual. Not just a manicure, pedicure. Not just a facial. Not only just all of those things. But actually, when I'm truly engaged in that moment, I appreciate what is the likelihood for me to fall prey to the distractions. It's like I have a chaver, a close friend, who says to me he can never ever remember when his wife gives him a list to go to Publix, what that list is. So he said, what should he do? He said, a rabbi once told him that what you should do, if you can't remember, what do you do? What's the best way to remember? Just jump into Shmon Esrei. You'll remember everything. Right? You start down, you can't remember, you said Shmon Esrei, Baruch Atah. Oh my gosh, I didn't call him back! And that list, now you know what, I didn't get the grapefruits, Gaval, and I didn't email him. And then all of a sudden I'm like pounding my chest, like, what am I doing? I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm like, take 3 steps forward, 3 steps back, I'm doing a jig. I don't even know what's happening. So if you don't remember what it is, jump into Shmon Esrei. Your wife, that's it, you remember all your lists. How's that possible? If we understand Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Somi Dali Fremiyat Ovid in front of whom we stand, so we'll understand that the moment of tefillah is an opportunity. We'll understand the significance of what it is. How much time do we have today? I know we're running down schedule. What's the 4 o'clock? So number one is understanding the significance of what it is. We have to understand what the room is. We have to understand what the Beis HaMikdash was. We have to understand what the Beis HaMikdash will be. We have to understand what a rebuilt Jerusalem is going to be. We have to be desirous of it and interested in wanting it. And when we have that, nothing can distract us. When you're in a relationship, you look at a young man and you look at a young woman and they just fell in love with each other. My younger brother just got married last year, and I got to tell you, there are many times I knock on the proverbial door, just like, hello, can I get in here for a second? They're like, in love, looking at each other, it's so lovely, it's all right. You try to distract that couple. In that moment when they're deep, you can't. This is a bond, and there's a connection. 3 steps back, 3 steps forward. Baruch Atah Hashem, I'm standing, Shivisi Hashem, Lenegdi Somi, opposite you, at this tremendous opportunity that I have to engage you. To understand, in fact, what it is, to make ourselves those spiritual spas that bring us to a place whereby there is no distraction. That's number one. The second suggestion, the second possibility is as follows. It's so interesting to me when we think about what is considered important. How do we deem something to be important? What is something considered important to us? Did you ever wonder why do so many people spend their lives pursuing financial success while neglecting the things that they know are worth so much more than money. Not to say that having this profession is there as a pechet left with an obligation. I understand why people neglect things that are eternal versus things that are not. Right? At the end of a person's life, as a rabbi, having had the opportunity on several occasions to be with people at the end of their lives, I have yet to hear somebody say, "Oh, Rabbi, I wish I spent more time at the office." Never. I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I spent more time with my spouse. I wish I told them more how much I love them. I wish I gave more alms, more stuff, and more charity. Never! Oh, I should have rolled my Lamborghini. I should have done more time in the office. It would have been so much better. My life would have been far more fulfilled. You'll never read this in an obituary, I don't believe it. The deceased made over $150,000 a year, drove a Porsche, and wore Armani suits. He was quite a guy. That's never what's written in an obituary. I certainly hope not. If it is, we're really coming to a dangerous place. So why is it that people spend so much time focused on things that they perhaps should be focused on? Valuing things that are really not so important. How is that and why is that possible? So I'll ask you a question. So if I ask you, it's all a function of knowing what's important, what's valued. Who considers something to be important? How do we know something's important? If I ask you the following question. If I tap on this desk, on this stand here, is that a meaningful activity? Objectively. No? It could be a very annoying activity, actually. Pardon me? Oh, Yaakov. So everyone immediately goes into Yaakov mode, right? So if I'm just standing here like this, certainly if I'm trying to take a Shabbos afternoon nap, and my young grandchild is doing that, so I'm annoyed, right? I have to take a nap, right? Maybe my grandchildren, my kids. What if I were to tell you that people are willing to pay top dollar to hear me sit center stage in Madison Square Garden, over 50,000 people, and I'm going to come out and they're going to announce me, "Ladies and gentlemen, Yaakov Gibber, the ultimate finger tapper." Oh, and everyone's rah, 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 clapping and tapping, and everyone's clapping and singing and dancing. So is that now a meaningful activity? I might feel more fulfilled. I might feel good about myself, because after all, people are cheering me on. What if I were to tell you, if you took a little bit of leather, and you took that leather, and you threw it through a metal type of container, you threw it in there. Is that objectively an exciting activity? No? Is it? Is it exciting to go to a Miami Heat's basketball game, to watch basketball players take a leather round ball and thrust it as hard as they can through a metal rim? Objectively, it's idiotic, if you will. But people will spend hundreds of dollars to watch it. Or they'll take this pigskin, watching people barbarically bounce into each other, tackling, cracking their heads open. Oh, millions of people watching, spending millions of dollars on commercials at the halftime show, etc. Why? Objective. So who determines something's important? How do we determine that something's important? You see, as a community, if we decide, not only as individuals, but most importantly as a community, that something is important and it's meaningful, the effect is so significant. It's so profound. I'll give you an example. Does anybody here know what happened here? I'm giving you a little history, most modern history. Anybody here know what happened on October the 12th, 2013, this past year, this past October? Parshas Lech Lecha, a brain teaser here. Keep everybody excited. Anybody know what happened? What happened was, it was an incredible project that was launched by the chief rabbi of South Africa. Anybody hear of it now? It's called the Shabbos Project, Keeping It Together. And the chief rabbi decided on Rosh Hashanah of this past year, 5774, that we're going to have an initiative with the entire South Africa, not just the country, that we're going to keep one Shabbos together. Forget about Boyton Beach. Forget about South Florida Corridor. Forget about the Eastern Seaboard. Forget about the United States of America, the entire country, South Africa, we're going to keep one Shabbos. Can you imagine? You'll Google it when you get home. You'll read it wherever you can. About this incredible one Shabbos that everyone spent together on October 12, 2013, Parshas Lech Lecha. Scores, thousands, tens of thousands of people coming together. Affiliations, denominations of all sorts. The only credential was, as Adolf Hitler, Yamach Shalom, also he himself was the only credential. If you're a Jew, you're a Jew. And if you're a Jew for Shabbos, we're going to come together. And there's a manifesto, actually. You can imagine, just look at the scenes. There is a manifesto for this Shabbos. Number one, we will endeavor to keep its entirety and all of its detail and splendor is set out in the code of Jewish law. This is what they deem to be important. If we deem it to be important, not just by thrusting this pigskin through a metal cylinder type of thing, but if we deem this to be important, number two, its rhythm will unite us with each other, Jews around the world and throughout the ages. On this day, we will create a warm and loving space, holding our families together, so on and so forth. They had multiple statements on a manifesto that invited an entire country to keep one Shabbos together. It's like almost like Lo Yuma, like the Gemara says. Can you imagine 2 Shabbos? It will be, and Mashiach will come immediately. It's remarkable. It's what we value. It's what we consider to be important. It's what terms something to be important. Just the society terms it to be important. We have to determine what's important. And by focusing our attention more readily, more responsibly on that which is the task at hand, we have the opportunity to be more effective and more meaningful in all that we do. That's point number 2. And the third point, and by way no exaggeration, perhaps the most important, is to understand the notion of what it means to believe in ourselves / trusting in Hashem. You see, what's so important about believing in ourselves and trusting in Hashem is so important in thinking about where we stand and where we are and the ability that we have to be effective in the things that we do. And let me explain. Just to paraphrase, I know we're kind of creeping towards the end here. Just to paraphrase, we know that in last week's Parashas Mishpatim, a slogan of the Jewish people was proclaimed. What was the slogan of the Jewish people? They stood at the foot of the mountain. Naseh v'nishma omru ke'achor. Right? What is Naseh? You will do, v'nishma you will hear. There's a ton of emphasis on hearing. Listening. But more than listening, actually hearing. When we say each day, twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, Shema Yisrael, Hashem, the emphasis is Shema, to listen. Not just to listen, but to hear. You talk to a person, you talk to your child. Are you listening to me? But what you're really asking is, I don't want you just to be listening to me. Do you hear me? There's a big difference. I see that you're listening, your earlobes are open, you're listening, but you have to hear me. Do you hear me? Shema Yisrael, Nasa v'nishma. The seminal event, the giving of the Decalogue at Sinai, the Sinaitic experience. But here's the problem, here's the challenge. The problem is that in Parshas Ve'eschanam, the second time the Torah mentions the giving of the Torah at Sinai, the Torah tells us that God warns the Jewish people, Pen tishkach, lest you forget what happened at Sinai. What's the language of the Torah? You would think it would say, Pen tishkach, lest you forget that which you heard. Right? Naseh v'nishma. But that's not what the Torah says. Pen tishkach, lest a person forget what you saw, the Torah says at Sinai. And so the question is, what is it? Which one is more important? Is it seeing what happened at Sinai, or is it hearing what happened at Sinai? And so the answer to that question, friends, I believe, is what I think is something that has been very difficult to understand for ages. At the end of the giving of the Torah at Sinai, you'll take my word for it, the liberty of just quoting it outside. At the end of the giving of the 10 utterances, the Aseret HaDibros, the Torah tells us that they were Ru'u Esakodos. Ro'im Esakodos, which means that they saw the sounds. Now the question is, how do you see the sound? That's the phenomenon. That's what was amazing. That's what was remarkable. That was part of the enormity of it. They were able to see that which is heard. So my question is, how do you see that which is heard? How do we understand that? The contradiction that seems to exist in the description of how the Sinaitic experience is meant to be remembered by seeing or by hearing, I believe that the answer is to see the sounds means when a person feels something, and they listen to something, and they hear something, and they feel something, and they know something to be Torah's emes, Moshe emes, and Torah's emes, and they know something to be true, to be honest, I feel it. So then the goal is to be able to see it, not just to feel it. We aren't just cardiac Jews who feel it in our hearts. We know that that's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to also be that we're Jews who are can actually do it. Naaseh v'nishma. To see the kolos means I'm going to see that which I feel. If I feel inspired by Torah learning, if I know that it's valuable and important, I'm going to learn Torah. If I know that giving charity and giving chesed, acts of loving kindness is important, so I'm going to commit myself to acts of loving kindness. I'm going to commit myself through my faith, through my actions, through everything that I do to see, to it, tangibly, physically, real life, real time, that which I feel deeply in my heart. And there's so many. I want to share with you an incredible story. When a person has an unwavering, a faith that is uncompromised, a person who really believes it is not distracted. Listen to this incredible story. There was a fellow who wrote an incredible article in a paper called the Yiddish Avart. Anyone who's ever heard of the same paper called the Yiddish Avart? In fact, the editor of the Yiddish Avart used to be, unfortunately recently passed away, used to have been in my shul on the Upper West Side growing up. The Yiddish Avart, he told the story as follows. A guy, Jewish guy, and he's on a plane, and he's flying. And while he's flying over the plane, he sees that the flight attendants are slowing down their service. And the captain gets on the loudspeaker and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Just want to let you know that we're going to suspend the drink service, the beverage service just momentarily. We're about to go into a tunnel of turbulence. We're just going to suspend it just briefly." It's okay. When you hear that announcement, maybe you feel a little better, maybe you feel a little more anxious. And as predicted, the plane started, buffering from left to right, to and fro, everywhere, right? So what happens at that moment? We all get a little bit very uncomfortable. We take out our tehillins, maybe, we take out our siddurim, we start praying a little bit, and all of a sudden they saw that it wasn't just temporarily stopped, but now the flight attendants are strapped into their chair, into their seats, and all of a sudden it was ferocious. It was a vicious, right, bouncing in the skies like a ping pong ball. And this guy is reporting how he was deathly frightened. It was dancing in the skies, and there was this thunderstorm, and this lightning, and it was painfully frightening, up and down, altitudes were dropping quick, fast. And he had his tehillim out with fervor. He was fervently davening, praying, Shema Yisrael. Shira malas imel nakim kirasicha Hashem. He was praying to Ribono Shel Olam. And out of the corner of his eye, he saw that there was a little maiden, a little girl, no more than 11 years old. And she's sitting in a row by the window, just opposite where he's sitting. And he's looking at this little girl. She's wearing like bright, shiny red patent leather shoes. And she's sitting there, and she's as comfortable as can be. She's not moved by the thrusting movements of this turbulent aircraft in this turbulent environment. She's as comfortable as a lark. And he's watching her. She's reading her book, she pulls out her crayons, and ding, 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 and her coffee cups are flying all over the place, and he's, Shema Yisrael, right? And he cannot get over this poise and the calm of this little girl, this little maiden. He's watching her. And he sees her. And the flight lands, miraculously, safely, taxis to its gate. Everyone is just like untucked, disheveled, a mess. Total chaos. And this girl, no problem. See, here's this little girl. When he gets off the plane, he waits. He's got to talk to this girl. And he says, "Young lady, I need to ask you a question. I see you this whole time you're sitting here, and you seem totally comfortable. To and fro. How's it possible that you're comfortable? Did you see? Did you feel what's happening? You weren't scared?" She said, "No, not even a little bit." He says, "Well, why aren't you scared?" So I'll tell you why, sir. I wasn't scared because my father's the pilot. And my father is taking us home. You see, when you have a faith that is unchallenged, when you have a faith that's strong and robust, that even when there are moments whereby there are consequences and challenges and turbulence and distractions, we know that the pilot is taking us home. We know that there is Avinu Shabashamayim, our Father in heaven, guiding us, leading us, and bringing us to a place that is the destiny of the Jewish people when we can be most proud and ultimately most successful. But it's only when our faith is strong. It's only when we're able to combat the distractions as they fester and foon in our presence, attempting to dissuade us, to encourage us, to intoxicate us, to drunken our stupor state, to bring us to a place where our religious conscience is far from where it needs to be. That's why relationships, husbands, wives, parents, children, are compromised. It takes that stamina. It takes us to the ability for which we find ourselves. A call, trusting, believing in ourselves, and ultimately trusting in Hashem. And we ultimately have to know that every single thing that we do, even if sometimes it seems inconsequential, there's nothing worse than inaction. I think the late President Kennedy said it best when he said there are risks and there are costs to action. There are. He said, but they are far less than the long-range risks of comfortable inaction. Inaction is far worse. I just want to end, if I can, by sharing with you a most remarkable story, and I think this kind of brings the point home. And we'll just review one last time, and we'll call it a day. And this idea of realizing that even something ourselves, even minimal that we do, it makes all the difference in the world. Believing in ourselves and trusting in Hashem. So there was a great composer, perhaps you heard, an Italian conductor in the 19th century, 20th century. His name was Arturo Toscanini. Toscanini was famous for many things. And he was a bit of a loner. He was a conductor, famous. And there was a biographer who followed Toscanini around and was scribing his life, wanting to learn the ways of this great conductor. And it turned out that on one particular occasion, as Toscanini was traveling around, he called this biographer and he said, "Biographer, I just want you to know that tonight is a night off. Tonight I can't be bothered. I need to have extraordinary concentration. I have to be precise and very uninterrupted understanding of what it is that I'm doing." So this biographer now was very encouraged, was very excited, very curious. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I want you to know that overseas there's a program that's being conducted by a different conductor than myself. I used to conduct that program many times. And I want to listen to how this conductor produces this or conducts this music. I want to listen very carefully. I don't want to be interrupted as I'm listening. I just want to listen." So this biographer says, "I've got to watch Toscanini, the great Toscanini, as he's listening to music and watch what he thinks and sees how he reacts and sees how he responds. He says, if you're quiet, I'll let you come. But if you're not quiet, you can't come." He says, "I promise." So they sit, the biographer sits in the corner of the room. Toscanini's listening to this music over these sound waves, many, many, many hundreds of miles away from where this new conductor is crafting the coordination of this music. And after this hour-long product is complete, the biographer turns to Arturo Toscanini and says, "Masterful conductor, was that a masterpiece? It was magnifique, it was unbelievable, pasta, it was great, amazing." Toscanini says, "No, it was missing something." He says, "Missing something? That was masterful." "What do you mean it was masterful? What do you mean it was missing something?" says the biographer. He says, "I want you to know there's supposed to be 120 instruments in that piece. And there's supposed to be 15 violins in that piece. But actually only 14 showed up. There were only 14 violins that showed up. And this biographer says, this guy's mad. Impossible! How does he even know that? Cannot be!" Because that's why the music was missing something. He says, "How do you know that?" So this biographer left, thinking that Toscanini was mad. And the next day he calls that concert hall and he speaks to the manager and he says, Tell me about the concert last night. Was it successful?" And he goes on to tell this biographer that in fact there was a little bit of a mishap. And the mishap was that there was supposed to be 120 composers, 14 violins out of 15 showed up, and it was compromised. And this biographer was like, how could this guy possibly know it? Impossible! So he goes back to Toscanini and says, "Toscanini, you'll forgive me, as of yesterday I thought you were mad. I thought you were totally compromised, unable to really know the difference between right or how could you possibly know that? And now I called the concert hall, and I hear that you're right. So just very simply, how did you know? How could you possibly have known that so many hundreds of miles away, radio waves, so far and so distant away? And this is classic, and friends, with this we're going to conclude. And this is how we're going to recover from the odyssey and the challenge of the absence present. He says, you know what the difference is between me and you? The difference between you is that you're the audience. And to the audience, it all sounds just great. It sounds perfect. It sounds just right. You don't know the distinctions of the crescendo here and the crescendo there, and this instrument versus that instrument. But I'm the conductor. And as the conductor of that piece of masterful music, I notice everything. Everything. I hear everything. Friends, there's the difference between what we perceive to be the reality and what the conductor of the world perceives to be the reality. The conductor of the universe, the symphony of the music that we play, every single thing that we do, albeit that it seems and is perceived as minuscule, is so meaningful to the conductor of the universe, master of the world, Avinu Shabbat meaningful, heartfelt, particular, necessary. That's the master of the world to the audience. Lest us be confused by the perceptions of the audience. Let us be stronger than the vicissitudes for which a culture and a climate calls our attention to be interested and engaged in a way we otherwise ought not to be. Standing strong, steadfast, aviate, fly, navigate, know, and to communicate to the Ribono Shel Olam in a way that is most meaningful. It is an epidemic. It is something that calls us very far to be places other than where we are. Let us learn, let us be inspired, not only to know the significance of the place, not to be moved by others' perceptions of the reality, but to know exactly what the reality is. To believe in ourselves, to thrust on the heels of what is our very strong and robust faith. And in so doing, we will continue to give lots of joy and satisfaction to the conductor of the universe, the master of the world. And we will overcome the challenge of the absence presence. And we will find ourselves present in the places we need to be, the relationships we need to have. I thank you so much for listening. I thank you so much.